And welcome all of you to our very special event workshop tonight. We have a really amazing person who is here tonight to talk to you a little bit about solutions that you can use to build your MVPs that don't involve bringing on a coder and don't involve bringing on a developer. There are definitely times when we need that support from the experts, but there are so many things that we can do ourselves as entrepreneurs, and it really makes a lot of sense to do what we can, bootstrap ourselves, and make it happen. And then when we do need the support, then we can get that there. So a little quickly about Mike Roberts. Amazing person. He is the founder, CEO of San Diego Code School. I met him through San Diego Tech Hub. And he is very, very involved in the tech ecosystem, the entrepreneurship ecosystem. He's helped a lot of students learn to code, a lot of students start companies, and he really knows what he's doing. And I love that. I love that he can help us to get resources that normally would not be in the hands of regular people like you and me. Until much later, much later, until everybody knew how to do it. So it's nice that we have this. So with that, I pass it over to you, Mike, and I'll let you kind of take it away. And don't forget that your microphone is muted. So take it away, Mike. And I think that I still can't hear you. So I'm gonna, Mike, can you hear us all right? No. Oh, maybe you can't hear. Hold on, we'll see if we can get. And another little issue.
Well, now, can you guys hear me okay now?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah.
Can everybody else hear him?
Mm-hmm. I can hear him.
Okay, wonderful. So that's all right. We can just edit that out. That didn't happen. All right, Mike. Did you hear what he said about you? All those really nice things.
I did. Those are all somewhat true, but a little embellishment there, here and there, and that won't hurt. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes.
Awesome. So as you said, I've been coding for a while. I've been in your shoes and launched many a product, and would hope to launch many more over the course of my lifetime. And one thing I consistently hear from a lot of folks is a need to kind of understand when I can take advantage of some free resources and when it might be helpful for you to get a coder involved. And I often hear from non-technical founders that they're looking for a technical co-founder, and it's generally because they're looking to get something built. They don't have those technical skills. And so I almost always want to encourage people to first and foremost see if you can leverage some either no code or low code tools to get to MVP, because I feel like that can in many cases give you the best shot of launching your product and getting going. So can everybody see my slides okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. So let's kind of kick things off. When I talk about no code, low code, I'm going to assume that you guys may have heard or seen some of these logos. You may have heard of some of these products. We certainly don't have time to dive into all of these tonight, but I want to sort of start scratching the surface of what you may be able to leverage out of these tools. And then more importantly, share with you that even from a developer standpoint, so I've been coding for about 31 years, built, like I said, lots and lots of things. I still love it when I can leverage a tool that lets me get a lot of things done without having to write very much code. And then if I have to write code and automate things, sure, as a developer, love to automate things, love writing code if I need to fix problems. But the old adage that there are lazy developers out there is very true. We are lazy and we would rather write no code than a little bit of code. And we'd probably like to write code versus like working 2 or 3 hours. I'd probably spend 2 or 3 hours coding. But if this is your skill set, if your skill set is that you don't have a real technical background, there's a lot that you can sort of get away with. And so one of the first things I usually will recommend is thinking about a progression and not what do I need right now or what am I going to need in 6 months, but like what is the rollout that I'll need to get from where I am, point A, all the way to point B or point C. So at the very beginning, it's super helpful for you to rely on your own creativity and grit, because that's the lowest cost. You don't have to pay anything out of pocket, and it's the thing that you have the most control over. So that includes like learning how to code, right? So you may decide that you really are not willing to sacrifice paying someone else to build a product, and you'd rather teach yourself how to code all the way to the point where you can get a minimally viable product baked and out there into the marketplace. Some people that's not that fun, and you'd prefer to leverage your other skill sets. And so what I would say is, again, get as far as you can get with your creativity and grit first, and learn a little bit and sort of start going down this progression of figuring out what can I get away with? What are some lower cost solutions that get me kind of close to where we want to be? And then the faster you can sort of iterate and sort of find that product market fit, drive some sales with very low expenses, the easier it's going to be for you to prove you've got a viable product. You can raise some money if you need to. You can sell in bootstrap. But once you're at that phase where you can delight customers and you can start thinking about what are the next features, then you can kind of go down this path of building that version 2 and hiring those software and developers. When the real limitation you have is you're not able to grow your product, or you're hitting a point where it's costing you too much money to acquire customers because of your technology, because of your platform. That like growth has come to a grinding halt, right? Now, in some cases, you just can't get away with building no-code, low-code solutions. That's entirely possible. And so I'll talk a little bit about that tonight, and what are some signs that you may be in that space, and you'll need to invest a little earlier in getting some professional help and getting people to kind of help you get across that chasm, if that's what you're facing. I want to pause here for just a second and take you on a little bit of a side trip. Can you guys see this browser window that I'm sharing?
Yes.
Awesome. So as a user of a particular MVP, there was a product out there a couple of years back. It's called Relive. This is their main website now. This is a fully fledged app that's in iOS and Android now, and it's for people that are either running or cycling enthusiasts. It allows you to, after you've gone out on a run, most people use Strava to track their runs, it will create this little animated video, and it'll pop up some pictures of what the experience was like, so you can share with your friends and you can relive the experience of this epic ride or run. And I was one of the first people to sort of sign up for the application when it was free and it was kind of going around, and the buzz was that this is super cool and you should try it out. It automatically syncs with the tracking applications that we all use anyways. So it's kind of a nice little perk. It was so nice, in fact, that we were all chomping at the bit to like pay money to get some additional features. So I like to ride really long rides, and the features that initially they baked into the application required you to sort of, you could get a map, but it was done automatically. You couldn't change the picture. So once you finished the ride, it just uploaded. And so there were a few constraints, and you could kind of tell that they had made a choice to sort of stop and either raise money or do something before they continued building the rest of the features. You could tell it was just an MVP, but it was still a pretty good experience from an end user's perspective. And so then one day I got an email, and it was awesome. It was like, hey, we're about to launch paid plans. You can sign up on this date, go to the website, click here, you can sign up, and here's what the features are going to be. And I read the features. I was like, wow, this is exactly what I'm looking for. We can have longer rides, we can edit the rides, and we can create new videos, we can edit the videos. This is perfect. So I was like, I'm ready for it. And I clicked on the button to buy now, and then I was taken to a page where on that page it asked me to start filling out the shopping cart. So put my name in, put my address in there, and I clicked the next button, and then suddenly popped up and it said, we're not quite done. Thanks for letting us know you're interested. Please come back later, and like we'll have the rest of the features. And at first I was like, that's super frustrating, because I thought they had built it and they had raised money and it was finished. But then the software engineer in me said, wow, that was super creative. They basically started with a small product, and then they did some additional customer discovery, and now they're in a different position because they actually built those last couple pieces using no or low code. I guarantee you they didn't have their engineers work on any of that sign up form, on any of that flow from sending out the email to having me click on it and going to a page and starting to go through the shopping cart. But they are now able to leverage some important pieces of information. So if you would, this is the audience participation time. What do you think they gained by using a low code, no code solution once they had that MVP to get them the additional information they were looking for? What did they gain out of that? You can unmute yourself. And
Yeah, I was going to say, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to put it in the chat feature, I can also read that. I see some people, Paula said data, Sarah also data.
They
Sure.
gained not spending money on features that they didn't need or their clients didn't like.
right, so perfect. So they didn't invest in what they thought the customers wanted. They instead, sort of in a tricky way, they said, let's see what they're interested in buying, and let's see if they buy at this price. Because when I filled out that form, I knew what it was going to cost. They didn't let me get to the point where I was putting my credit card information in, but they showed enough intent out of my screens that I went through to tell I was ready to buy, and I was ready to buy at that price point. So they got super valuable data. They got to figure out how many customers were ready to buy right now. They got to figure out if the price point was correct. They got to figure out if that was exactly the right number of features that they would need to convert me from a free product to a paid product. And they didn't lose my business. So even though they weren't ready at that time, when they were, which was just maybe a month or two later, then at that point I subscribed, and I've never looked back. I've never gone back in and said, hey, I'm going to cancel it. Even when I've had long stretches of not writing, I still pay the monthly membership because I think it's a valuable service and it's a really cool app, and I want to support the developers. So this should give you guys the encouragement that even if you are in a scenario where from the very beginning you can't build the MVP without some engineers, you will still be able to participate in the process, and you'll still be able to get value out of building some of the pieces yourself. And the more you can build yourself, the more of the money you'll have left over to pay the developers for just the things that they need to build. So it's not just a one-time thing up front, it's something that you should be constantly thinking about. What can the rest of the success team or the product owners do to contribute to make sure that everything doesn't rely on just engineers? Because if that is the case, there'll be a lot of wasted funds, because engineers are expensive resources. And so if it's not necessary, you definitely want to do it without the engineers. So I'm going to pick up now in the presentation and walk you through when you don't have the resources for devs and you're just kind of doing some low code solutions yourself, the things that you should not stress out about, because this is what a lot of people use as their barrier to say, I can't do this, like I need help. They immediately start worrying about things like vendor lock-in. Like I've heard that if I use this platform, that'll get super expensive, or it'll get super hard, or I won't be able to scale. Don't worry about any of those things initially. At this point, worry about getting your MVP baked. Worry about getting a product, getting something you can put in front of customers so you can get more data, information that you need. When you start building something initially, a lot of people think about, I need to be able to scale this. I need to have millions of users. I need to have infrastructure in place. And again, I would caution you that the last thing you want to do is be paying for very expensive infrastructure when you don't have that many customers. So you want to leverage tools that are going to give you access to lots of data without you having to stand up a big amount of infrastructure or a bunch of code in order to solve that problem. You want to be focused on optimizing the user experience, but nothing beyond that. So it doesn't have to be the fastest loading page. It doesn't have to be the greatest performance. It just needs to be good enough for the user to be like, hey, this is like super cool. Like I like using this. It solves whatever my need or reason for trying the app out is. And then the last thing people worry about early on is they worry about automating everything. There may be some kind of a workflow that you want to have automated, but in the very beginning, before you start coding it, it might actually be helpful for you to start doing it manually and really feel where the pain points are and feel the places where, okay, this isn't going to scale well, but that's not an issue. You've got time to put those workflows into place and to build those mechanisms. You want to know where and when it makes sense and what automations are going to save you the most amount of money and most amount of time. Does that make sense? All right.
I was just going to say, Mike, if you could, I don't know if anybody else is having issues seeing the PowerPoint. I'm not having any trouble, but is anybody else having any issues seeing PowerPoint? I saw a message from someone. Can everybody see his PowerPoint? You can see it? You can see it fine? Yeah, so can I. Okay, sorry to interrupt. Mike,
Awesome.
go
Yeah,
on.
no worries. If you guys have questions, feel free to interrupt. I know I talk kind of fast sometimes, so feel free to interrupt. I want to make sure that you guys get a ton of useful information during the session. So
Awesome. And we're recording it, right? So that's awesome. Yeah.
sweet. So you will probably need engineering resources right away if you are not willing to do anything, right? If you say, look, I'm a technophobe. I don't like anything technical. I don't like a computer. I just can't do this. Like, I need someone to walk me through each of these steps. Then yeah, you're going to need to have somebody in there. If you're also willing to give up more than 50% of your equity in the company, then yeah, sure. You can find engineering resources that would be more than happy to step in and take a chunk of your business in order to provide you some services. I would venture to argue that's probably the worst business decision you could ever make in your life. But some people are willing to say, look, I'll give up almost half of the company if I just don't have to deal with any of the technical issues. And then finally, if you can't get 80% of the way there with the kinds of tools that I'm going to show you, then you probably need to get engineers involved sooner rather than later. And again, this is just to get an MVP, just to get what it would take to show a minimally viable product and start actually getting some sales or getting some traction that you're going to measure, whatever your key performance indicators are. Is it getting people excited for getting a seed round raised? Is it getting enough money for you to be able to get a bigger product built? Whatever that goal is, if you can't get 80% of the way there with some tools, then you need to consider right away leveraging developer resources. So, we got this screenshot here. If you want to be able to do virtual 3D surgery, you're probably going to need engineers, right? If you're doing something a few tiers below that, you might be able to get away with some other tools. So the other piece that is really difficult that I recognize as an entrepreneur that may not have a deep technical background is that sometimes things that seem like they're very easy to do are actually very, very hard, expensive, or time consuming. And some things that seem like they could be almost impossible to do are very quick, very simple, very easy, because there's existing code or there's other ways that we can leverage technology to make it go much faster than the average person might guess. The only way for you to reason about that is to either ask somebody for help and say, hey, I'm not sure, is this going to take a long time, or is this something that's like super quick? Easy is a relative term. So if I say something is easy, that doesn't necessarily mean it's fast. It means that for me, I could probably accomplish that without a lot of work effort. Might still take some time. So the only way you can reason about that is by having some experience and like either being involved in projects or having prior experience building projects. So it's perfectly fine. I think most developers are perfectly fine to answer questions about, hey, would this take a long time to build, or is this something that is fairly trivial to build and doesn't require a lot of resources? And they'd be more than happy to guide you down that path. You just have to be willing to say, take the time to sit down and kind of lay out what it is that you're trying to accomplish. It's also super good to go through that process of doing the due diligence and making some effort on your own before you reach out to the developer, because then you could already separate. These are things that have been challenges for you as you've been trying to implement solutions versus the things that you found you could get up, got that taken care of, it's all working. It's just these one or two things that seem like they're kind of tricky. And then there might be a fast solution to that, or there might be, hey, we got to redo some code. We're going to need to change some things, and it's going to require a little bit of work to get you 100% of the way there. So just be willing to suspend your own objectivity and defer to people that have more experience, because that's really the only way that you can tell in many cases. One thing I also caution people when they're starting to look at low code and no code solutions is to get out of the mindset and mentality that everything should be free or that you should only leverage the free tiers. A better way of looking at it is to do the price versus speed versus quality, like balancing act, right? I'm sure many of you guys have heard the price, speed, quality. Can anybody tell me what I mean by that?
Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. What is the relationship between price, speed, and quality?
I'm trying to give you guys softballs, but I know you're shy tonight, so.
I know, it seems like people just aren't willing to to speak up for some reason tonight, but throw it out there. Any one of you. What's the relationship between price, speed, and quality?
Well, you think
They all cost money.
I'm sorry. So I saw a couple people speaking. Money is what a lot of people are saying. Was it Karen? Did you want to add something?
I was
see
just agreeing with what they had said. Yes.
And I see Kayla said better quality equals more money.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that's the gist of it. And so the way it's usually explained is that you can win in any two, but not all three of these categories. So you get to pick two, and you get to have two of those categories that you win in, and then you always sacrifice in one of them. And so if you want something that's absolutely free, then you are not going to be able to get really good speed and really good quality out of that tool, right? And so you want to be able to instead come up with a way to evaluate which tools that you're considering, and then look at what the cost of it is beyond free. So look at the first tier, right? Don't just look at the free tier, right? Now it's great if you can leverage the free tier. That's optimal, right? But you shouldn't stick yourself into a position where you're like, I will only use the free services, and I'll use 10 free services, and that's the way we're going to go. Because you may in fact find that you will sacrifice some speed and some quality if you're not willing to pay a little bit. And what you want to be thinking about is, what do I get for this $20 investment? If this $20 investment allows me to get my MVP out the door in 30 days, what is that truly worth to me? Is it worth paying $20? In many cases, the answer is, heck yeah, right? $20, I get my product out there, I start getting it out in front of people, and that's what allows me to continue to move my business forward, then it's well worth it. So I would say if you're paying $20 for this service and $5 for that and $10 for this and maybe $50 for another, $100 a month can go a really long way in terms of getting you the essential features you need, versus if you hire an engineer and the engineer charges, let's say a senior engineer like myself, I charge at least $150 an hour, typically closer to $200 an hour. A junior engineer, maybe closer to $25 an hour. Mid-level engineer, you're looking $50 to $100 an hour. So you're going to get 1 or 2 hours of my time. And so, $100 goes a long way with some of these tools versus 1 or 2 hours of developer time where we're just getting rolling, right? We're just getting started. So think about the budget from a perspective of being reasonable, and what is a reasonable amount to spend to get back the return of, like, I'm getting a site up quickly, or I'm getting to accomplish these intermediate goals on my way to an MVP. So the tools that I like, I'm going to give you a bunch in some different categories, and then we'll take a closer look, and then we'll sort of pause and give you guys a chance to ask some questions. So I'm super thrilled anytime I can get away with using something like Google Forms or Typeforms, right? So those allow you to very quickly build surveys or kiosks, even some basic intake forms, contact forms, and you can connect them through a tool like Zapier, which could link it up with another tool, like maybe Constant Contact for email, or SendGrid or MailChimp, any of those email platforms. So if you combine each of those three, maybe Typeforms with Zapier with MailChimp, you can get a lot of the functionality that you might be able to get out of something like Salesforce or HubSpot, which are customer relationship management tools that you would use to maybe market to your customers or manage the sales flow to your customers. Those tools are going to be somewhat expensive, right? HubSpot starts off free, but then it very quickly escalates to about $1,000 a month, and it's based on the number of users that you have. And Salesforce the same way. Salesforce starts at like $3,600 a year, and then sort of escalates by the number of seats that you need throughout each month. So you want to be able to, if you can, leverage something like Zapier, Typeforms, and a MailChimp to get all your marketing emails done, right, at a very low rate. If you're thinking about a product that is largely an e-commerce product, think digital delivery, products that you're selling, fulfilling some kind of service where they buy it online and then you deliver it. you may be able to leverage something like Shopify, which is a site kind of like a WordPress, I'm not WordPress, Amazon, where you can put your product online, digitally sell it, and be able to fulfill giving those products to your customers. WooCommerce is a plugin that you could use with WordPress, and those two combined, WordPress with a WooCommerce plugin, similar features and functionality as Shopify. So you could build an e-commerce platform around almost free open source tools. I say almost because there will be some hosting costs associated with it. You might have to buy a premium theme, so you don't have to pay a developer to make it look really beautiful and really super polished, right? The next category of no-code tools that work really, really well are, again, those lead generation, corporate website type tools. So in that category, you have a local San Diego company, Webflow. They have a great product. You've got WordPress. A lot of times you can build SaaS products directly on WordPress, and it may only require a little bit of custom code. And then you've got MailChimp, SendGrid, a bunch of different providers that you can use for your marketing. So you can send out automated emails, and you can have drip campaigns where you're keeping people notified of product updates, and you're sort of pushing people through the sales funnel. And then finally, on the very early version, when you're creating an MVP, I often suggest if WordPress isn't the greatest platform for like a SaaS product or for maybe a web app, you could go to Envision. And Envision is a product that lets you create vaporware, which is basically screenshots of each of the pages inside of your application that have these little links where you click on one place on the screen and it takes you to the next page, right? And so you kind of have this feeling like you're using the application, but you don't have quite all the code, right? And so it's kind of in between a demo and a real working application, sort of somewhere in the middle. I would say closer to a demo than a working application, but there are ways that you can make it functional. Maybe you only have one part of the app functional. Maybe it's just a contact form, right? Or some place where someone can, tweet out a social media post about your app, and you drive people in to sign up for, early access to the beta program. Lots of different ways you can get creative to maybe not have a functional MVP, but have enough that gets you to your goal, a viable product that you can start selling or you can start building a business on. And then once you're past that phase, there are still low code tools that you can continue to use to grow the product. So one of the ones I used a lot is Optimizely, that lets you do split testing. And so you can test version A versus version B of a headline, version A and version B of a landing page with a form, and see which one converts better, gets more people to sign up. Things like chatbots like WeChat, Unbounce for pop-ups and exit intents. And then finally, tools like Zeppelin, which lets you take the creatives and the artwork that you have and quickly get them into a tool like Envision. And so you can go from prototyping to a real product very, very quickly. The one thing I also encourage you to, again, think about all these tools as not something that you're going to throw away, but something that you're going to use for the rest of the product life. You can start something on Wix or on Webflow, and you can use that website for the rest of the life of the product. Maybe that landing page that you build converts really, really well, and there's never a need for you to rebuild that technology. So there will be hopefully lots of runway with the initial version that you build, and you won't have to rebuild it for quite some time. So I'll give you just, again, my top 3 favorites. We'll quickly run through them and I'll start answering some questions. The first is, again, Zapier. So of my favorite tools, this is probably the best. Very low cost. I think their plans start around $20 to $30 a month. And it gives you plenty of runway for you to start automating some of the functionality. Maybe when someone signs up on your website, you send them a Slack invite and you shoot off an email to your sales team, right? When someone detects a bug in your application and they're in your beta, maybe you can automatically add that to a spreadsheet and send out a notification to your dev team, and they can jump on it. So lots of different ways that you can automate that workflow so that you can make it faster for you to get that feedback from your customer and be able to respond to that in a timely manner, right? In the meantime, you still have email, right? You still have Slack, but you want to start kind of funneling everybody down these paths that are going to let you be super productive. So until you have an automated workflow, you could use a low code or no code solution. And then eventually you may have to go to something that's like super robust in enterprise, right? Like ServiceNow. service desk platform, right? That's enterprise level, service. The second is Webflow. Like I mentioned, Webflow is a local company, so it's great to support local small startups. The San Diego JavaScript community actually has about almost 6,000 members, 6,000 JavaScript developers that know front-end code. And guess what we use for the San Diego JavaScript website? We use Webflow. We built it on Webflow about 3 years ago. We redid the website, and we haven't moved off of it since. Why? Because we're all busy developers, and we don't want to take the time to hand code a website. So instead, we use Webflow. It has some built-in workflows. It has some forms that we can collect data on. It satisfies all of our need, and we didn't have to write a single line of code. And again, we're developers. So this is something where it's definitely a doable tool for other folks. And then the last tool that I mentioned is Envision. And so again, you can take your mock-up from idea and you can create these super high fidelity mock-ups of the apps or demos of the apps. And then you can literally click through the application as an end user and it links you from screen to screen as if it's a real application. So, and that's again called vaporware. I don't know if you guys cover that, but definitely a bunch of tools that you can use that do these similar functionalities. So try them out. And if it turns out that you don't like a particular tool, I wouldn't give up. I would try another tool and see if you can kind of get some additional functionality out of maybe a variation of one of the tools that you've tried and doesn't seem to really work for you. That is all I had for my slides. So
that was just so much jam-packed, full of information in there. And I'm really excited to actually try some of these out.
okay.
Yeah, this is awesome. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open it up to the audience. If you have any questions, specific questions for Mike, you can unmute yourself and ask him directly. If you're having trouble with your mic, feel free to put it in the chat.
Hi, Mike. It's Karen. I have a quick question. I have a friend / acquaintance. Her name is Lexi Walter. I believe she was a student at yours for the code school. And her and I were talking. I was asking her some questions because I too am a non-technical founder. And she had told me to know what type of, if I'm saying this correctly, if we're developing an app, to know what type of software that we're going to use. So when we search for an engineer or developer, she was explaining to me how it seemed like some work with some different systems than others. And how do we know which one to choose? I hope that question makes sense.
It does. That's a great question. So from the outside, it can be really, really difficult to find the right fit for your first sort of technical roles. And so I always encourage you, please, 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 rely on people that can give you advice. We're super friendly. I'm more than happy to answer anyone's question when you're trying to vet, like, is this person a good fit for the role that I've envisioned for him? What is an even more painful conversation is when someone picks the wrong either technology or team to start building their product. And then when they get to me and they ask me, hey, I need some help, they tell me these horror stories about how their technical people are non-responsive, or they have a CTO and then they start describing the behavior. And I'm like, well, that's not a CTO. That sounds like you just have an engineer who was helping you to build your product, right? So that sounds like an architect, a senior architect, a good software engineer, but that doesn't sound like someone I would call a CTO. And so you want to kind of go through a vetting process. And if it's at all possible, rely on some of your advisors, rely on some people that have more experience than you when you're selecting the crew that you're going to have to build your product. Try not to be in a position of like desperation where it's like, I'll take help from anyone. If they offer me help, I'll take their advice, I'll let them build it. I want someone to build it for free. So whatever they recommend, we're going to go for it. Like, let's just trust that they can do, what they say they can do. The reality is that, I'll be candid, this is not advice that most people want to hear, but as a senior engineer, right, someone has done this for a really long time, it is nearly impossible for you to convince me to work on your project. Why is that? Why do you guys think it is nearly impossible for you to convince me to work on your project?
Well, I would imagine that you have other things that you would like to work on as well. And probably from the perspective of like the money, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, time is money, right? So we all want to make some money and enjoy what we're working on, right? So my perspective, and this is one that if you just think about it from the developer's perspective, it's going to be super hard for you to convince me that not only do you have a better idea than something that I can come up with, but that you'll also execute on your part. It's like, I don't need you. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I need you to go out and like sell and build the right team and find financing. Like that's all the stuff that you can do. I'll do the building, but I don't need your help to come up with an idea, right? Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the entire package that creates a viable business. And so if you're in a position where you're relying on someone that has this technical expertise, if they're really good, they're not going to be free. If they're really good, it's going to be really hard for you to convince them because they're good at what they do. They're a very valuable resource. You know, it's like going to like a doctor or a surgeon and saying, I want you to give up your practice and come like work out of my garage and like let's you know do whatever the business is, but you need a doctor or you need a surgeon for it, right? And so there's a finite number of developers that have the skill that you're looking for that are going to be, it's like ships passing at night. It's very rare you're going to find that person that's going to be super interested in the same thing that you're interested in. It's much more likely that you'll find someone that's super interested, but they might not have all the experience because they're a little bit newer, right? And they don't yet know, they can't work on everything that seems like it's cool. They really have to pick and measure their time. And so there's this weird balance that's very, very tricky and very hard to accomplish. And what that results in is a lot of folks, if they speed through the process of selecting a team, they pick the wrong resources for the wrong reasons. They don't get enough advice. And then it ends up being difficult because oftentimes I tell people when they're in that situation, hey, a lot of the work that you did, we're going to have to throw it away because like it's not usable. We got to start over again, right? So it is 100% acceptable to just ask for help and say, you know, rather than relying on gut instinct, Karen, I would say, don't think about what the technologies that you need to do. Get advice. You know, go to the Bring Your Own Project night and talk to some developers there. Talk to the organizers, right? And say, hey, I'm thinking about
Can you
this.
repeat the name of that? What was that program called that you just?
So San Diego JavaScript, that's one of the groups I'm involved in. They host monthly events, now doing most of them remote, but you can tap into that community. They're on Meetup, so you can tap into either the JavaScript community or the Python community. Talk to the organizers. Talk to the folks that run those communities. They're super friendly. They'd be super happy to talk to you about your ideas and things that you're interested in building and give you just advice. And they'll tell you, oh, no, you don't want to do this in Python. You should go talk to the JavaScript group. They'll help you out, right? And they'll start pointing you in the direction. And then you can sort of trust that advice because I'm not giving the advice because I'm going to make any money or because I'm interested in working your project. I just want to see you succeed. And so I don't have a dog in the fight other than I want you to win. And so here's what I would recommend. Why don't you try Wix first, build the pieces that you need to first. And then when you're stuck and you need a technology, I can either suggest this or I can suggest, hey, you probably need to vet some engineers. We need to talk about your budget. We need to figure out what aligns with that and how can you find the resources to get to where you need to go. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Thank you.
So the short answer is I can't tell you without having a conversation with you, this is the right technology fit. But very quickly,
Right.
if you were to say, hey, take 10 minutes and explain sort of where you're at and what you're doing, I could say,
Right.
Oh, it looks like Mike froze a little bit there. Hopefully he'll come back here with us shortly. While we're waiting for his screen to come back, if any of you have any additional questions that you'd like to ask, you can either put them in the chat feature, like I said, or you can unmute yourselves. Now, for those of you who are, a techie glitch, a little techie glitch we had here. Those of you who are in our Regional Entrepreneurship Center, the Rec Innovation Lab, if you can stick around a little bit after this meeting, I would absolutely love to chat with you just for a few minutes about some of the things that we're doing to increase the resources that are available to you. We just I'm actually excited about some of the things that are happening. We got the ability now to bring in interns over the summer, and some of them we can actually potentially pay them, which will be nice, which will help. If any of you are not in the Entrepreneurship Center but would like to work in a startup, on a real startup company, we could use you. We would love to have you. Please go ahead and send me a message. I'm going to be right now putting my contact information in the chat feature. That's T Hertz. Oh, I put the SDSU one, but that's okay. SDSU or Miramar is fine. Send me a message and we'll get you working in a team. We'll get you credit for course credit for working in a startup, and eventually, by hopefully fall, there's the opportunity to pay you as well, which is nice. So it looks like, did we get you back, Mike?
I'm back. Sorry.
Awesome. That's okay. That's okay. So
60 seconds.
that's all right. It worked. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too bad. So where were we? I think I'll pass it back to you. I know.
Sure. So I think I was just rambling on at this point. So are there any other questions?
There were other questions, actually. There were other questions. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your favorite tools that they could potentially use to create apps.
Sure. So it depends on what kind of app. So if you're building something that's like a SaaS product, I really like WordPress, right? If you're building something where it's like, hey, it's a social network, we're trying to connect people, and we're doing it in this innovative way, I'd be like, all right, great. Like maybe start with WordPress, see if you can get a bunch of plugins and get to look really, really nice, and then focus on the user experience. And don't get too distracted by it's got to like have the exact functionality that you thought and you envisioned. Just get it working, right? And then test it out. See if people enjoy using your platform, right? So whatever your secret sauce is, because usually your secret sauce does not involve coding because you're not technical, right?
Yeah.
The next one I really have on my radar right now is a product called Dribble. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but Dribble is supposed to be like a full-featured no code. And so that's all the way on the end of like, you need some functionality and you're just not ready to start investing in custom code quite yet. But it's a little bit more custom than something like Webflow or Typeform, where you can get some part of it. Yeah, I can send you links to this. I'll make sure I send you that one. That one's a pretty neat one.
We love it. Love it. Send them over. So I have a question from Paula also. Paula, are you able to actually unmute yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, this is actually kind of tagging along with what you spoke to earlier about, seeking advice on what's the lowest minimum viable product available. But speaking to the value proposition of high quality software developers and engineers such as yourself, would you suggest a consulting appointment for someone like you or someone who's experienced as far as getting the biggest bang for your buck, as far as knowing, okay, here's what we're looking for, what do you recommend, etc.?
Sure.
That's my question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll even give you a trick to save yourself a ton of money. And that is to just try and be involved in the community, try and get involved in the developer community. So one of the places I mentioned, so the San Diego JavaScript community, prior to the COVID where we weren't meeting in person, went online, it's a little tougher, but in person, you could go to a meetup and there's usually a part either at the very beginning of the night or the end of the night where you can just, talk to people, ask questions. That's a great time to sort of like corner a nerd and just ask a bunch of technical questions and see if you can get some help. And they're usually super helpful because we like talking about technology. So I'm more than happy to just like stand there and yak away. San Diego Tech Hub is another great community of lots of tech folks that would be happy to sort of like walk you through, oh, okay, that sounds cool. It kind of sounds like this. Maybe you should try looking at what this team has done. Or they'll introduce you and they'll say, you should definitely talk to this other person, right? It's more of an issue of like getting on the schedule. Like I tend to not like take a consulting gig if it's just like a one-time thing where someone needs like an hour of advice. I will usually just tell the person, hey, if I've got bandwidth, just here's a link to my calendar, set up an appointment and we can chat. Because I mean, to go through all of the like let's send your proposal, and let's get a contract out, and then my accountant's got to deal with it. Like it's not worth it. Now there are scenarios though where like you can get a senior engineer to become a fractional CTO and basically get you from the point of I've got an idea, but I know for sure I need help picking the technology stack, vetting a technical architect, and getting that first team set up. And I need to understand the composition Do I need one mid-level engineer, one senior? Do I need one super senior? Like, what do I need? The key is going to be figuring out like if you have a budget for that. And if you don't, then you have to sort of take the route of like, let's see if you can get some help for free first, and then make the most out of your, the bang for your buck.
That's super helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Mike, that kind of leads into a question that I've had from some of the entrepreneurs at the Rec Innovation Lab who have they've submitted their the forms to you. They're really hoping that maybe one of the teams might take them. Is there anything that they can do to increase the chances that they'll get to work with some of the code school students, or are there particular kinds of companies that they're looking to work with, or you're looking to work with?
Sure. So it's not super technical, and so it really is in the hands of the students. We like the more information you can share about your project, the more compelling you can sell. Hey, this is a cool project to work on. It's going to be super fun. You've got a really supportive team. They like the idea. They like the vision and the mission of the organization. And it's within the scope can be narrowed down to something that they can, at each 2-week interval, really have something that adds business value for you. Then those are perfect projects. And so you just have to think about it from the engineer's perspective, right? If you do a really good job doing that, then it's easy to get them to say, oh, I'd rather work on that than if we don't have a good project from the outside, then I give them projects. And they don't always like the projects that I give them because they're just like, grade books and tools in the back end. They're not nearly as fun as like building a mobile app, right? Or a couple landing pages and tying some APIs together. So it's not challenging, but I would encourage you to put your best foot forward as if you're like pitching it to get an investor involved. If you treat it kind of like it's not that big of a deal, like, hey, we just need some help with this little thing, that's not nearly as good as like selling it to them and saying, here's why you want to work on this project. We're working on this amazing technology that lets you do X, Y, and Z, right?
I love it. Did you guys hear that? Sell yourselves. Sorry, Mike, I interrupted you. Keep going. Sorry.
No, absolutely. That's the key.
And do they still have, if they have put in their request, do they still have time to go in there and modify it and do some changes?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we pick the projects is about every week we evaluate where students are in the curriculum. We have a smaller number of students in the curriculum at the moment than we've had previously, and that's due to COVID, right? There are some people that decided to put school on hold, and so we're kind of shifting our model and creating this apprenticeship opportunity for folks. But that just means that we'll have lots more people that will be ready to actually work on things, and we'll need to kind of cut their teeth in the coming months. So I can't guarantee when students will be ready to start a group and be looking for a project, but I'll tell you this much: we started a group today. Right. And so far, D'Anthony, who I think is on the call still, he's just been cleaning up. He's been like, every group has just been like, no, we'll keep working on this project. Like, we got this, like, this is good. So that's a testament to the fact that like they had a novel idea and it was something that the students wanted to work on and everything just kind of fit. And so had someone else in the interim, like created something that like impressed the students, then he would lose the resource and someone else would get that, that resource, right? And so it's just that simple, right? Is make it compelling. And there's a chance that students will finish on a Monday and be ready to start. And it happens fast. Yeah. So we'll usually know on a Friday that there's a group starting. We'll give them the chance on Monday to look at the projects that are available. And then at that point, they'll make a decision and we'll immediately get a hold of the entrepreneur and say, hey, we've got a team. Are you committed to working on this with them? Next couple of weeks are going to be really fast. And then if you say yes, then the next day students they're building, right? And so it happens quickly.
So you guys heard that, that form that we sent out, really work on getting that compelling. This is your sales pitch. Treat it like you're selling to an investor.
Absolutely.
We want to get them on board with you. Cool. So I saw a question here from Ray that he wanted to know if you, and I apologize, I'm not a techie, but do you guys teach C, I don't know, C pound coders or C hashtag coders? What is that? Yeah.
C#.
Oh, okay.
C#.
Okay.
Yep. C#.
C#. Yeah.
So we do have some C# curriculum. We had just started rolling out the C# curriculum. So we haven't yet started really doing a full cohort yet of the C# coding. it tends to not be a fit for a lot of small startups. It tends to be more what's used a little bit more mid to larger size companies. But if it's the right technology choice for what you're doing, then by all means,
For programming in Unity. So
oh yeah, that makes sense.
unless, you know, we just use visual. So it's kind of challenging because it's a niche. Right?
No, I know some great Unity developers. So it is, we have some Unity, we're actually doing a Unity project right now. So we have, but it's something that we're doing as an organization. It's not something we have any groups doing, and it's not something we have the students doing yet, but we're actually building it up. So that's the reason why. So we are helping out a local organization called NFAR. I also work for a local organization called Pong. Both of those organizations focus on VR games to help people that are on the autism spectrum. So they have neurodiversity, and they do research. So it's over at the Qualcomm Lab, the National Foundation for Autism Research. So they do a lot of stuff with Unity and C#. So that would be a good use case for C#. But we don't have a ton of resources right now. But
That's okay. No, it's you can see in the background now. See, this is what we're doing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
I should look very visual to you. How do you also teach conceptual aspects? So, for instance, security, right? Data security, integrity, and so we'd be very much, you know, want that. I know that I can't talk for this entire group. This is probably beyond what they'd want. But on the other hand, I think that a lot of the people on this call would really should worry. You're pulling data in, especially because of what the European and the California data laws are right now. You cannot just deal with that on what it was a year, 2 or 3 years ago. There's a lot of aspects to what you have to do for that data to keep it secure, right? So I was just wondering if those are aspects that you also teach into your coding classes.
Okay, so in terms of teaching it as like an embedded part of the curriculum, I wouldn't say like it's covered in the courses. However, it is like one of the things that we coach them through. So when we give the students a project in the final project, we don't like set them loose on their own. They have to check their code into us. So we're constantly watching the code and as senior engineers observing and following all of those best practices, right? So we're interested in, is the API secure? You know, where is the code housed? Is it under version control? Are we linting the code? Do we have those GDP and some of those other mechanisms in place to ensure that we're collecting the information and we're fully disclosing to folks what we should be doing with it? If we've got to be HIPAA compliant, is it being stored in a HIPAA data source? Is it accessible? And, you know, are we building websites that are accessible by everyone and not just folks that can like see without any visual impairment? Those are all best practices that we try and teach as we're having students work on projects. So it's very much on our forefront of thoughts as senior engineers when we're coaching people about building. We don't want to build, you know, shoddy product that are going to cause other people to have to go in and do rework in order to get it launched. We want you to be able to launch it, and that might mean you launch with a smaller set of features initially until you have time to do some of those other things.
Right. MVP. Yeah. Now, quick question that I have from actually Angelica wanted to know, are you willing to share the PowerPoint slides from tonight with the group?
Absolutely. It will just cost you $1 million.
$1 million.
Sure. So I'll try and make those available right after I remember. I'll send out the link. So just remind me and I'll shoot it out.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can always just either send it to me or you can put it in our Slack channel, whatever.
Yeah. Slack.
Yeah. So cool. Any other questions? Oh, it looks like we are out of time. I don't want to go over. I want to be respectful of.
I can hang out for a few more minutes. So
okay, good. Does anybody have questions? Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? And any direct questions? So I know some of the questions that I was getting. Well, maybe I'll pause and wait. Does anybody have any questions? Okay.
Yes, I do. I have a question. Okay. On one of the forms that you have that we filled out, at the bottom it asked how are we going to what are they? Oh my gosh, what was the question? It was something about if your students could share their codes, how much, and or if they can't have the code at all. Now, what is that? I didn't know what to put on there. I think I just I think I did 2 things and I pressed other and then I explained my answers, but I don't know what to put on there. What does that mean? Karen?
Oh,
I'll let you tell it to.
yeah, so I was a little like freaked out when this came up because it has come up in the past. And so I'll make it a short story, but it's interesting. So we had this attorney that came to us, and by practice, he was an attorney, but he had this idea. He thought, I'm going to build this app, and it's a nail app, and you're going to like be able to hold your phone and do some AR, and you can see the different fancy nails that you have. And we're going to have this in the stores and kiosks and all this stuff. And I was like, all right, cool. And so he said, but we need you to sign an NDA, and we also need language change in your contracts to include these paragraphs. And I was just like, yeah, no, I can't afford to take on the liability. I can't afford to have our attorneys review documents to do a project for you. So if you want our help, we can certainly do that, but we're just gonna have to charge you for it, and we'll just do a contract, and you can just hire our developers and they can build a product for you. And so my guard goes up right away that I'm gonna encounter another person like that in my future. And so I always just tell them that, like, the first rule that I learned about like investors and people that you're asking to do favors, you can't tell them, I'm not gonna talk to you until you sign an NDA. Because it'd be like, okay, well, I'm just not going to give you any money then. How about that? How you like them apples, right? So there has to be a little bit of give and take. There's got to be a little bit of trust. I'm not saying go out and tell everybody your idea, right? But if you decide that you want to ask someone for money, then they're going to ask you some questions, and you've got to be willing to answer some questions and go through that due diligence process. Similarly, if you want engineers to work on your project for free, you got to be willing to give something up. And the something that we ask in exchange is, the students want to work on your project so that they get real world experience and so they can talk about what work they did. So if you have a project that's like stealth and you can't let anybody know anything that's going on with it, it's probably not a good fit for the students. You can certainly pitch it to them and you can tell them, hey, you're going to get to work on this really cool project, but you can't tell anybody, right? And they might like that. They might be interested. My argument is most of them are not, because they want to show an employer, this is what I worked on, you should hire me. Right? And so you're taking away a large part of the value proposition for the students if you're asking them to work on the project, but then not willing to allow them to share at least some details about the work that they did, how they contributed to the project. And that could be anything from a couple screenshots, and then they could have a narrative where they talk about what they built, all the way to like having videos, and you can like watch the video and see what they built. That's largely what would be enough for the student. And so as long as you can like provide that, then I think the students are usually more likely to be engaged. The less you allow them to talk about, the harder it is.
Yeah, I just didn't understand, like, because I don't understand your discourse, right? Because like I don't understand any technical, well, a little bit, but not the coding, semi-coding, like little side to the side. I'm like, what is this stuff? So I didn't know. So I just kind of clicked on the things that I kind of looked up and saw, like, that I understood. So just to make sure.
It's pretty typical that we will keep your code private, so no one can see your code, right? That's generally something that we just don't ever share. We don't want someone to take the work that you've done and just copy it and like change it a little bit, right? So we keep that very close to our vest, but there may be a situation where you feel it's okay for a student, if they are on a job interview, to share a piece of the code that they wrote, right? So they might ask you that, hey, is it okay if I share my private repository with someone I'm interviewing with? If I'm doing a live interview, I won't send your code anywhere, but can I show them that, right? So there's varying degrees. We just want to be 100% transparent that for most engineers, if you just say, hey, you can share screenshots, the app's going to be in a store, so if you want to tell people you built it and point them to the app, that usually is enough. But code is almost always kept 100% private. There are cases where it's not. And so sometimes the code is like an open source project, right? And so you're building something, like we had an entrepreneur that built a special blood pressure cuff for like the Fitbit, right? And so they wanted to be able to make sure that people could actually like have the device talking to different types of wearables. And so part of it was they wanted to open source the project. They wanted everyone to be able to leverage the code. And like that was one of their things. And so unless it's that type of situation, your code's always kept private. Everything else is just to kind of help the students communicate what they learned in their experience.
And if I could add something here too, the way that I think about it with coders and developers, Karina, is think of them like you would think of graphic designers, right? Or any other artists. you're asking for something for nothing. If you want them to do it, you have to give them, you have to let them put it in their book, in their their brag book. You have to let them be able to talk about it and share that they've done something amazing. If you don't, what'll end up happening is they'll just pick another team and you won't get the support. And so I would always say, yes, share away, let them share. The code is private already, so let them share.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Okay, I'll mute you. I muted her for a second, so if you want to say anything else, you can unmute
But
yourself.
the other piece to just be practical also is I know everybody thinks their idea is like super valuable, but it's not the idea, right? And this really sunk in with me. I was having a conversation with the CEO of WD-40, lives here locally. And so he basically said, the secret to WD-40 isn't the formula, right? Like anybody could find and discover the secret formula. That's not what makes WD-40 WD-40. It's the people that work at my company. That's what makes my product. And so it's not the idea, it's not the concept, that alone, right? It is your team. It is the folks that you've put together that are going to be able to bring this to market and make this, a $100 billion company, right? A $10 million company, a lifestyle business, whatever your goals are. The team is the secret sauce. Ideas are a dime a dozen. I don't want to take your ideas and steal them. Trust me.
And most people don't. I love that you said this. I say this all the time. It's not the idea; it's the execution. It's the way that you see the idea and your team sees the idea. Every person, even if they tried to copy it, wouldn't be able to know what's going on in the background. So I'm always all about get it out of your head, get it out there, share, and
absolutely.
Ideas. I love that you say that. Ideas are a dime a dozen.
So, Mike, can I just say something really quick? This is Julie. I helped Tanya. I just wanted to thank you for that. And we have a short code for it. It's called WIFM, which is what's in it for me, right? That's what we call it. It's like there's got to be something for everybody. And the closer you hold things to your vest, the less help you get. So that really resonated with me. But you know what? I did have a really quick question for you, which was, here, I'll start my video so you can see I haven't done my hair today, or maybe not, I don't know. Yeah, okay, so here I am. You told us a really great story about the website and about how they teased information out of you and almost made you sign up. I was just interested if you had other ways that you could share with the students here about maybe ways to, because what they got that you were interested, you'd be willing to pay, and these were the features that you were interested in, but they did that at a potential risk of really pissing you off, right?
Yeah, but
if that was me, I would have been like, I am so dialed into getting these things and I am so willing to pay, which I'm never willing to pay for anything. And then you got me all the way to the finish line. I just happened to have this happen with Lowe's of all people. I couldn't buy this rug that I wanted to buy because the website wasn't working, but yours was a little slightly different. So I just wondered if you had other ideas for teasing out information without potentially.
Sure. So I spent some years in ad tech, and so I was on optimization team. Here's the rub with that though, is that you really have to get into optimization and get into split testing and have that really pay. You have to have really big sample sizes. And so when I say really big, I'm talking like we had 1 million visitors over the course of like 3 days. So every 3 days we'd have 1 million visitors, and we still didn't have enough traffic for most of our paths to be able to get to a statistical confidence that version A of a page is better than version B. Now, when you get to Walmart scale or Amazon or Netflix scale, then you can run those A/B tests and you'll see them. Every once in a while, you'll see a different user interface than your buddy will see on their screen. And you'll be like, well, that's weird. Is that new? And they'll be testing something new, right? TurboTax does that. They're great. So you'll get some of those, we call that lift, out of those split tests where one will perform better than the other. Then you swap it out. That becomes the new king of the mountain. But I would say just be creative. And if you're always trying to make your customers super happy and delighted, they'll forgive you if you do something intentionally on their behalf, right? The Lowe's is a little bit of an exception, and that's like the site was broken. That's a defect. That's a bug. No, it's not a feature. But this was a feature, and it felt like a bug at the time, but it also felt like a little cheeky, but it felt like, okay, I get what you're doing. Like, you wanted to see if you invest in these features, will I buy? I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer all day, every day. And even though you trick me, I'm gonna still buy it the day it comes out. So just let me know, and I would gladly hand you my money if you can give me that feature. And so I wouldn't be worried about that. I think if you can find a smart way to do that, you should definitely do it. And it's like the donut trick, right? And so we've had guest speakers come to our school and talk to our students and tell our students, after a great interview, you should send the person a box of donuts, right? And I guarantee that will swing and influence their hiring decision, right? Just send them a box of donuts. Or if you want to get a hold of a hiring manager and you can't get them on the phone, send them a box of donuts and see if they don't try and figure out who you are. Yeah. But even after telling a class full of people, like, you should try that, how many people out of that room try it? Maybe one. And so everybody thinks the employers are just all going to have all these donuts and they're going to just never want to eat donuts anymore. That never happens. So if you feel like there's an idea and it's worth you taking a little experiment and trying it, just go for it. You got to do it. Rather than being perfect, just try it, because I guarantee you a bunch of other people are not trying it, and it just takes being that standout. Just takes that one thing that you're willing to do, the effort that you make, that makes the difference and starts building that customer relationship and whatnot. So there's not like specific techniques that I'm aware of other than just like try and be creative, try and think of ways that you can surprise your customers if you can. Go the extra mile with customer service, reaching out to them. People are surprised sometimes where I'll answer the phone, right? And to be like, oh, you're the CEO. Yeah, like if the phone rolls over and rings to me, like we're not that big of a shop. So, or they get an email, or if I respond on LinkedIn, like I respond right away, because it's like, well, if I'm online, I'll respond to you, right? If I'm not, I can't. But if you can do those little things, your customers will like definitely appreciate it. So I don't have like a specific technical thing, but I would say if you keep those philosophies in mind, you're going to do great.
Yeah. And thanks for adding that. And just so you know, Julie, I shared a couple of a little bit of information here for you about what we do for payment testing in the Gazelle path, and to test that assumption that our customers will pay, and many other things. And so there are some other things we can do for that, and
sure.
I'll share that document with you as well. But yeah, but it's very common. It's very common. Entrepreneurs do this quite a bit.
You can also ask them to share, right? You can say, hey, what do you think of this product? Are you willing to share it? And if people are willing to share, that's very strong social proof that they believe in the product and they're confident enough, right? So you can measure your net performer scores. You can send out a survey and see, are you like keeping your customer happy? So there are like very traditional things, but I thought you were thinking of like something like super whiz bang. Like I don't have that many super whiz bangs. Like those are tough.
Yeah, it's pretty whiz bang. I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, there's some kind of tried and true things that we can do, and some are more effective and less sneaky. Sure. And there's a lot that can be done. So so I think unless do we have any other quick questions for Mike here from anyone? All right, so then I am going to thank you once again for coming. It was just so great to have you. This was one of the most beneficial workshops for me. I can say I really got a lot out of it, and I hope that everybody else, I think they probably did too. And I can't wait to see what gets built in these student companies. I know that you're going to be doing some amazing things, and you've already done them. So anyways, thank you. Yeah, we have a lot of thank yous for everyone. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. If anyone wants to stick around and ask any questions, I will be around afterwards. Thank you again, Mike. Thanks so much.
Yeah, Tanya, can you hear me?